Welcome to Clarifying Catholicism's Science of Catholic Teaching. In this series, we examine the Church's teachings on marriage and sexuality from a scientific perspective. Most of the studies cited in this series were compiled in Father Robert Spitzer's The Moral Wisdom of the Catholic Church, a defense of her controversial moral teachings, and they can be found in the description. Without further ado, on to the show. Towards the beginning of this series, we mentioned how many of the trends against traditional marriage and sexuality can be traced to the popularization of the birth control pill in the mid-20th century. Today, we will explore some data regarding the impact contraception has on couples. We already explored how contraception undermines the mature levels of happiness between couples in episode 2, but we can recap that here. Levels 1 and 2 of happiness are concerned with materialistic pleasure and ego comparative, meaning they reduce relationships to raw pleasure and a means of stroking our own egos. Very utilitarian. Contraception, specifically outside of its use as a treatment for reproductive health disorders, which the Church permits, threatens to reduce sex to something that merely feels good, rather than a fulfilling, contributive, and spiritual experience that compose levels 3 and 4. Which are contributive, empathetic, and transcendent faith-based respectively. The procreative nature of sex is radically contributive. It is the epitome of giving yourself to the other person to create new life. It is also radically creative. It mirrors and shares in God's ability to create. If we isolate these layers of love from their lower counterparts, we threaten to devalue sex into an immature utilitarian pleasure fest. And who does this pleasure fest benefit? Ironically, men. Who does it harm? Women. A few studies seem to support this notion. Let's dig in. In 2022, 85% of respondents to a British survey said that contraception impacted their relationships. In fact, a quarter of respondents said it played a role in their relationship's downfall. A 2023 study showed that women who took hormonal oral contraceptives were 54% more likely to divorce their husbands when compared to the average divorce rate in the study. Men with vasectomies were more than twice as likely to experience divorce. Couples who used condoms were 67% above the average divorce rate. By stark contrast, women who actively used natural family planning were 47% below the national average divorce rate. And that brings me to my next point. The purpose of contraception, at least according to a lot of feminist literature I've read, is seemingly twofold. First, it's avoiding having children. Secondarily, though, contraception allegedly empowers women to have control over their bodies. Given the slew of statistics I just cited, it seems that couples who use contraception for the purposes of preventing conception may actually be less happy than those who don't use it. Furthermore, I've met several young women who do use contraception with their partners, and they tell me two things. It messes with their bodies, and their significant others become demanding of frequent sex. The fact is that there is a way of having sex that preserves the intimacy that involves level 3 contributive empathetic and level 4 transcendent faith-based relationships. This is natural family planning, or NFP. Now, I'm not going to go into precisely how NFP works. There are better sources than this series for that, but it is essentially timing sex to optimize or minimize the odds of conception. Doing this takes advantage of the body's natural cycles to optimally time sex, whilst not detracting from sex's contributive, empathetic nature, nor taking away from God's role in blessing you with a child, if He sees it fit. Though, if you ask most couples who use NFP, most of them report that it is quite effective. We've shown that contraception seems to negatively impact quite a few relationships. How do people who use NFP fare, though? A 2015 study showed that women who use NFP were less likely to have been divorced than those who did not use it. 74% of men and 65% of women claimed that NFP actually improved their relationship. Compare that to a quarter of participants in the aforementioned British study who said contraception led to the total demise of their relationships. 62% of women and 63% of men claimed that NFP improved their sex life, and 69% of women and 72% of men said it helped them talk about their sexuality. Keep in mind these questions aren't binary, as in they weren't yes or no questions. All questions used a sliding scale between yes, no impact, and no, and there were very few responses that indicated any negative impact using NFP had on their relationship. Another study that measured several relationship quality factors found that NFP users scored 47% higher than artificial contraception users did in marital function. Let's address one more topic that the pro-contraception camp invokes: overpopulation. The idea is that contraception is good because without it, we would overpopulate the world. This is not true. Not only are we not at risk of overpopulating the planet, but we are in severe danger of economic and societal collapse because of depopulation. Currently, half the world's nations have fertility rates below the replacement level, causing many analysts to expect a global population crash by 2076. A prime example of this is communist China, whose one-child policy has led to a massive aging population that must but cannot be sustained by its minuscule younger generations. Population decline directly causes mass unemployment in the workforce and higher taxes, as the government must provide benefits to the aging population that the young people have to foot. Thanks to immigration, we aren't being hit as hard in the United States, but mark my words, in the following decades, my generation is gonna feel depopulation's sting. This video's purpose isn't to shame people over contraception. Heck, this series' purpose isn't to shame anyone who engages in the practices we've explored. As I mentioned before, sexual ethics are just one branch of the many moral commandments Jesus gave us. Obsessing over them is unwise, but discarding them as archaic values is even worse. The sexual revolution, which promised freedom and flourishing because of so-called sexual liberation, has resulted in depression, anxiety, divorce, and new diseases. This series has explored just a handful of studies that show the remarkable intersection between faith and reason. Father Robert Spitzer truly did a phenomenal job at compiling these in his book, which touches on so many other moral issues, from the death penalty to euthanasia. I highly recommend picking up a copy. In my opinion, the future of educating young people about these issues isn't bashing them over the head with a Bible. Rather, it is presenting them with these statistics and data. That's not to downplay the importance of a good theology of marriage. After all, Jesus' marital theology are some of the teachings that nearly all historical Jesus scholars agree came from his historical person. Oh yeah, that's right. Our next series will explore the historical Jesus. Until then, have a great day. God bless you. Now, a special thanks to Dr. John Grabowski of the Catholic University of America for being a consultant on this series. He reviewed the script, recommended additional studies, and made some general remarks. Thank you, Dr. Grabowski, for not only being a great help in putting together this series, but also being a wonderful mentor. I took his class when I was a graduate student at Catholic U. Thank you for all the work that you do in this field.